So I definitely see myself in the interfaith movement in terms of bringing it into the healthcare field. I want to practice medicine and serve a diverse population, and I realize that for many people, religion is a very central part of their identity. So when taking care of them, it's important to understand, or at least have a basic understanding of where they're coming from. A lot of people turn to their religion when they're in times of stress or in difficulty, and it's important for physicians and kind of healthcare people in general to have a decent knowledge of how to work with those communities to improve their health.
For me, interfaith is everyday life. As a music teacher, I have students of all different backgrounds and religions. And in order to best help them as a teacher, I have to understand what are the constrictions on them? What are their values? What do they and their parents feel comfortable with? So it forces me to then become very creative in best helping my students.
But what I struggle with the most is the limitations that I face being a teacher in a public school. To be sure that students of all backgrounds feel comfortable, I have to be very careful about how I discuss religion. We have a lot of opportunity to discuss religion as long as we approach it from an academic lens, as long as we are discussing it as a part of the curriculum. And unfortunately, what that generally means is learning about the facts and the doctrines and the principles, which is important. I think religious literacy is a very important part of interfaith work. So I'm proud to say that I help in that area. And as someone that aspires to try to encourage students to have interfaith dialogue, it's definitely a challenge because in the classroom, I'm a little bit constrained by the curriculum and kind of the norms of a public school. Research shows and our experience as educators show that when the curriculum connects to students' lives is not only when it becomes most memorable and they remember it for the test, but also is when it has a real impact and it really is transformative. And so if I can better guide the teachers on my team and also other teachers I'm connected with on social media, I'm hoping to demonstrate how interfaith work can be done within a public school, within the limitations that we face. But it's definitely an uphill battle because of people's fear in discussing religion in public schools.
I've been able to use my skills that I've learned through IFYC and interfaith leadership in general. And again, it goes back to this concept of not reinventing the wheel and also working to really learn people's stories. I think both of those things go hand in hand in my work. Really looking to other faith communities to learn from them and their work, and then also, trying to build those bridges by having people share their stories of resilience and of activism and all of that. And so I think that it's really, those are the two skills that I've kind of taken. I know interfaith leadership is grounded on storytelling, and I think that that's been really important and I try to do that in whether I'm working with youth or whether I'm working with adults and professionals. I try to sort of have a storytelling component in every one of my programs.
I said, okay, I actually want to go into communications and into peace building and all of that stuff. I didn't come to realize that interfaith work would be that stepping stone until I entered college, because it was something that I lived my whole life. I would say that becoming a human rights and social justice activist is based on the fact that I'm doing it through the lens of interfaith cooperation. I'm not doing it as a political, social, or economic justification. We're trying to solve a moral dilemma. 84% of the world adheres to religion in some way or the other. And even those that don't are a part of the human experience. We share a common human condition, and we don't want to see other people suffer. And I think interfaith cooperation is that platform to allow people to understand that when we see things differently, it doesn't necessarily mean that we don't have suffering mutually. And through that mutual suffering, discrimination, or injustice, we can accordingly go forward and say that we can walk shoulder to shoulder in solving the bigger problems of our world. Even in the most barren of deserts, progress is the blossoming of a single flower. If you really go through this work with your full heart and potential, and you make something come to fruition, you'll create an everlasting change that can be seen for generations. And I really have full faith in that ideology.
I'm a millennial rabbi in that generation that is coming of age before our eyes. I grew up in a society that was already among the world's most religiously diverse, and I don't see my tradition in juxtaposition to others, but in relationship to others. So I feel that in finding and in carrying out my sacred purpose, it inherently entails interfaith work. And so as a rabbi, I'm not a rabbi just within the Jewish community, but also within the wider world. Interfaith leadership impacts so much in what I do as a rabbi. I first learned about community organizing in an interfaith context. I first learned about leadership in general in an interfaith context. I first learned about the depth of relationship that can happen when differences are acknowledged in an interfaith context. So for me as a rabbi, everything I do has been touched by the interfaith movement.
My commitment to interreligious engagement is primarily based on religious literacy development, and it has been for quite some time now. I focus on religious literacy education in the United States in different capacities, in public schools, at universities, at even the federal government level, having foreign service officers or diplomats think about religion in more complex ways. And I'm also, there's this religious literacy component to what I do. I also work for a nonprofit and for other projects that are committed to thinking about religion and conflict mediation. So often in the United States, religion is seen as part of the problem, that if only people were less religious, we wouldn't see so much violence in the world. There's a growing understanding that actually religious traditions have deep resources to mediate conflict, to engage with difference across difference in very rich ways. And so what I would like to see is greater cooperation between religious communities, policymakers, civil society, and scholars, not to, in an unconstitutional way, blur the boundary between church and state, but to say that religious communities have something to add, that they shouldn't only be engaged with in a security framework, that they should have a place at the table in the public discourse to talk about what is it to build a just society, what is it to live in a diverse world, and how do we engage with the violence that we see, not just religion-related violence, but other types of violence, and not just physical violence, but also social violence, the violence that we commit against one another, and inequality, in climate change. How do we engage religious communities in the depths of their tradition to create a more just society?
In the last couple of years, I've been working within the Muslim communities, one around women's leadership and women's access to religious spaces. And as I mentioned, this is an issue that our sisters in the Jewish traditions and the Orthodox Jewish traditions are also facing. And so on the one hand, it's a bit of a relief, and you feel like, there's some soul sisters out there who know what you're going through. The second piece of what I've been doing is around active citizenship, and especially with young people, millennials and younger, around what does it mean to be an American Muslim in this time. And I've also had the opportunities and the privileges of working in Western Europe with not only Muslim communities, but also minorities and people from the majority communities who are also asking these questions. What does it mean to be European? What does it mean to be French? What does it mean to be Belgian? And I truly believe that to be an active citizen, to be a kind of a person who is making the world a better place, you have to be religiously literate. You have to be an interfaith activist. And this is something that, in my trainings, in my work, in my lectures that I offer to everybody, is that if you don't know if everybody in your social circle looks like you, like how it was in my childhood, step out of that for a second.
Within the interfaith movement, I'm more on the ideas side. I do professional communications, digital and otherwise. So I'm the guy making the memes, writing the blog posts, helping guide stories to people who need to hear them. And that can be a role that is hidden often. We're not up there at the barricade. We're not, agitating somewhere. And I've seen that as a strength for me because I like to lead from behind. But it's also an important way for me to use my intellectual gifts for the good of the movement. I think the interfaith movement needs people in all sectors. They need someone in a newspaper, someone in a local police department, someone who works just for regular city services. All of these roles that can have an interfaith element that help prop up our religiously plural and diverse communities are all important parts of the overall interfaith movement.
A lot of the work that I do at Grand Valley State University and in the broader Grand Rapids area in West Michigan is centered on interfaith leadership. And not only who are the interfaith leaders living in our community, but who are the future leaders of our community and who's going to continue on this movement. So interfaith leadership has become really core to what we're doing on campus and in the community. What's really unique, I think, about the work that we've been doing at Grand Valley is putting interfaith into a broader conversation in higher education around identity, diversity, inclusion, intersectionality, and really showing, I think, the civic relevance of what interfaith is on a campus. And what interfaith is and interfaith leadership skills show students is that ability to engage across difference. And these are transferable skills that go to students who are engaged with the Office of Multicultural Affairs or the LGBT Resource Center, and engaged with civic engagement and service learning experiences going abroad. Because these skills are kind of the way that we're teaching students what it means to build relationships with people that are different from you and build it in a way that is safe and affirming, but also encouraging you to be a little uncomfortable and to step out of what you're used to in order to grow yourself and ultimately grow your community.
I find that interfaith and my course of work at City Hall intersect all the time. And I don't think that a lot of people realize that. Speaking about faith and politics sometimes, it's very personal. I often tell people when I came to City Hall, when they say, oh, are you ready for this partisanship right now, this divided government, are you ready for this? And I said, I'm used to getting Jews, Christians, and Muslims to agree on things, so I'm not too scared of Democrats or Republicans. I was invited to a pastor's roundtable with my congresswoman, who is wonderful, and it convened about 10 or 15 of us around a table. And there was a point when we were on a conference call with a colleague of hers who said Obama is a Muslim, he wanted to outlaw Christianity, and in order to counterbalance this, we need to live our faith on our sleeve. And we need to do this in the public realm as much as possible. And clearly, this is a chance to do interfaith work, right? To be sitting next to a sitting congresswoman who is very, very high up in leadership in the House. It was very daunting to not tell her that she was wrong, to call her out on something like that, because that's not what interfaith is about. Interfaith is living your life in a series of teachable moments. So what I ended up doing was raising my hand very meekly and just asking for some advice to the gentleman that was on the conference call and to her. Do you have any advice for millennials who want to live out their faith on their sleeve? I find like sometimes it's difficult for me to do that at City Hall. And I'm wondering if you have any advice, Congresswoman, for myself or a good friend of mine who's Muslim who gets things thrown at her because she wears the hijab, or a good friend of mine who's Jewish who was refused service at a coffee stand in her district. Do you have any advice for us? Do you have any advice for a good friend of mine who wanted to enlist in the armed forces in the district but was refused from the local recruiting center because he wore a turban, because he's Sikh? How are these examples not living up to that ethos of what it means to be an American? And there was a lot of people who shifted in their seats at the time. And I really had to find the courage inside of myself to be diplomatic, right? To, again, use teachable moments and to expand people's thinking through the heart. And that's the way that we bring people together, I think. You can apply interfaith to anything. I think so often colleges are these amazing places where we find how to be good citizens, and that it's not just about getting a degree, it's not just about finding a job and starting to create a career. I think that interfaith is a unique and remarkable way of bringing people together, and we need that in all of the disciplines of the Academy.